to a pretty amazing man. This guy single-handedly developed the 1976 Apple personal computer revolution and co-founded Apple alongside Steve Jobs. His name is Woz. Everybody please welcome Steve Wozniak.
Is that Steve Wozniak?
I think it is.
The great and powerful Woz.
One of the co-founders of Apple Computer. He and Steve Jobs started
I know who he is. I watched Dancing with the Stars.
Steve Wozniak, best known as the co-founder of Apple Computer along with Steve Jobs. But it was the Woz alone who built the first personal computer, the Apple I, and later, the Apple II, the device that launched the personal computer revolution.
I said, hey, Woz, come over and meet Steve. So Steve meets Steve. And this is where it happened.
Apple wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Steve Wozniak. You know, I mean, that's just plain and simple. There were a lot of things that Jobs was responsible for, but Steve was the guy that built computers in his head.
We liberated some parts from Hewlett-Packard and Atari, and worked on a design for about 6 months and decided that we would build our own computer.
And Jobs said to me, I knew that with Wozniak's brilliant designs and my marketing skills, we could sell anything.
It was like, we'll both do it for fun, and even though we're going to lose some money probably, we'll just have been able to say we had a company.
I think what makes Steve Wozniak so special is he's just a really sweet guy that loves technology more than anyone I've ever seen in my entire life.
As far as Wozniak was concerned, the world was a great big sandbox with a lot of toys to play with.
He went on to become devoted to passing on his passions in mathematics and electronics.
Setting up classes for kids, giving them computers, giving them high-quality instruction and teaching them that. Yeah, there was something they could do if they had the right resources, if somebody believed in them particularly.
Steve Wozniak is the original do-it-yourself guy. The guy who figures out how to do something. Here's a problem, what do I want to do? What would be some fun way to use technology to solve a puzzle? And then opens it up to everybody and changes the world.
So everyone, we finally have Steve Wozniak on the stage. Amazing. Round of applause for Steve. So Steve, are you feeling excited?
Great to be at this kind of event.
This is your thing, I guess, right? I mean, this is what you grew up with, right?
Yeah, I can say one thing. I was very unsocial and very shy way back when I did all the work to start at Apple. So, you know, as a startup myself, so I would have never thought, oh my gosh, you'll be talking to other people who want to do startups.
Did you guys do any events like when you were growing up and putting together this great company, Apple? How was it? Did you have events like this that you participated and tried to convince investors and stuff?
Absolutely. Well, we had science fairs in schools, and I had some unusual learning in electronics for a young age and early learning in computers for a young age when there was no way to get books or magazines. So I would build big, huge projects that almost nobody in the world quite knew what that was. It wasn't anything out of school books or the sort of things you studied in school. But it inspired me to go there and win prizes and that sort of thing, talk to judges, yeah.
Did you ever have any role models?
Role models, the most important one, of course, was my father, because he was an electrical engineer, and he never impressed on us, you should be an electrical engineer, you should go to certain colleges, you should do certain things. Never, he always let you choose. But I would go down with him to where he worked and watch him twiddle some dials and get signals on a screen, and whoa, I really loved that, and I loved him working hard at home. So I got into electronics at an early age. Science fairs was a big part of it, and I read a book. You know, role models sometimes come out of movies or heroes, you know, and a hero in a book was a ham radio operator who could connect to friends in other cities, other states or countries even. And oh my gosh, at the end of the book it said you could order the materials to become a ham radio operator. Wow, you know, study this. And I was only 9 years old, and became a ham radio operator. So I kind of knew analog electronics. And then by accident stumbled onto the digital electronics stuff. So the hero in the book was a ham radio operator that solved a kidnapping. And so I wanted to be a ham radio operator. So that was kind of a role model. In high school, we had an electronics class that was ahead of all of the local colleges. It was all due to one person, one particular teacher that was not a normal teacher who just said, I'm going to have books and I'm going to teach these chapters on these days. No, it was a teacher who wrote the courses himself, something I learned about teaching And I had two goals in my life: to be an electrical engineer like my dad, and to someday be a teacher. So he was the methods that he used, I applied in my own days when I later taught for 8 years in public schools.
Fantastic, father. Interesting. So we received so many questions from the audience that they want to ask you. Those they send it to our social media, and I'm going to actually try to cover them as much as possible. If I do not, I really feel sorry because Steve has limited time. So one of the questions that we received from a lot of young entrepreneurs is that if you have to choose a career today, what would you be today?
It's a tough question, and I get asked it once in a while, and I'm not sure that I have any answer. Does it mean that I have my youthful talents, or do I have what I know today about the world and would choose based on that? But I think today I would probably still wind up being an engineer over a teacher. I just think that there was something in me that always loved connecting parts together. It's like when you learn programming, you learn logic. This followed by that in a certain sequence and an order gets things done, and I love doing that. Building large projects that took weeks to build with hundreds of parts for science fair projects was another good part of my life. So I think I'd be doing that again. What field would it be in? You know, it's kind of like the world of analog electronics moved to the world of digital, which didn't involve the same mathematics and stuff, which moved, and a lot of what was hardware in the past became software decades ago. And, you know, and now we're moving towards, basically, we build devices for people. These are how we recognize the important things. The apps are more worthwhile to me than the devices, because the device is pretty much just a thin client to show you what's being computed on computers out in the big data centers. You know, everything's going on. It's kind of run by big companies now. So I'd probably be writing apps. You know, interactive apps, you know. It's hard to say what's going to be useful. And I've misjudged a lot. I thought, you know, something like Uber. Oh, my gosh, maybe it'll work in San Francisco. I didn't even think Uber would go. So, you know, you can't really pin down something and say, oh, I have a good feeling this is right. But I think I'd be working on those little things. And I'd be doing like I did when I was younger. I'd be working on things that were just fun, interesting. I could show it off to other people. Look what this does. Is that cool? Not necessarily worth the money of a large company. But if you keep doing that, every time you do one, you learn the skills you use to do it, you make up new skills, and if you teach yourself all along the way, you're always more intelligent, and you do better and better projects. And if you ever do a big one that a lot of people would want, that would be the start of a big company, you kind of know it. It's like a home run. So I think I'd be working on, probably in the apps area, but I was so much a hardware guy too, it's hard to say what hardware would be like.
So, you know,
developing a new computer operating system that isn't hackable.
You know, it's like, so all the venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, including myself, we're crazy about artificial intelligence, AI. And a lot of talk going on. In the last 1 year, I invested in 10 different AI companies, actually. And because everybody thinks that AI is going to be the next big thing. Any thought on that?
Yes. Well, you know what? It's always good to look at what are going to be the big things in the future. Wow, find a company that's doing a startup in one of those areas. I want to get in with that company. You kind of want to a bit. I was very lucky. I was involved with Hewlett-Packard. Even though it was an existing company, they came out with the handheld scientific calculator. It was the hottest product in the world, and I didn't have a college degree, but they interviewed me and hired me on the spot. I got to design those things. Well, sometimes you luck into the company you love, the product you love the most in life, and you get to work on it. So you'd want to do something big, like artificial intelligence is going to be so big. But you also need education and intelligence. You need to have some skills that you have a clue of what's been done before a bit, so you can put the pieces together and do a better job yourself. I think artificial intelligence is going to be the wave of the future, but I'm not sure I would be the one doing that.
Good thing
Although
to know.
I'll tell you, any app I did, I would want to make it work with voice. One of the voice assistants, no matter what. I'd tie it into Amazon Echo or something.
Perfect. So I definitely learned something. I need to be careful a little bit and, you know, find my ways around when I'm investing, most probably. So I'm going to switch to the question that came from the audience. Yeah. So one of the things that many people asked, that Steve Jobs said that, you know, without you, there would be no Apple. So why did he say that? Can you give us some insight about that?
Steve was always very respectful of me. We were always good friends, actually. We always respected each other very much, and we were different types of people what we wanted in the world necessarily, but I wanted to be a great engineer. Steve wanted to be important and create great things and technologies. To do that, you needed a company, and he knew it. For about 5 years, he was picking up little things I designed for fun, and he was always turning them into money and trying to get to where he could maybe someday be with a company. We had no money. We had no savings accounts, no business experience. We were very young, but I was sort of a key, because every time he came into town once a year for about 5 years, he would see something I had just designed out of thin air. Never, ever did I do anything that would be considered copying, engineering. It was all engineering driven, and he would turn it into money. So I was a key item for him. However, you could also say, well, without me, maybe Steve would have decided to start a computer company, although I will tell you the truth. I was telling him the social implications, how it was going to improve life, how computers were going to be so important. It was coming from me. And that story's never told because it was in early days, like Steve Jobs' Zero, before we started Apple. And I think he would have gone around and had this idea, oh, these personal computers are starting up. I want to start the company without Steve Wozniak. And it almost happened because I said no on the key decision point. Our investor said, you have to decide to leave Hewlett-Packard by Tuesday. And on Tuesday, I said, no, I will not leave Hewlett-Packard. I am going to be an engineer at Hewlett-Packard for the rest of my life. And that's an engineering company. We build the products engineers use. At Hewlett-Packard, I'm an engineer's engineer. And so I said no at first, and finally Steve Jobs got all my friends and relatives to call me, and finally I realized it was okay to start Apple and still be an engineer. If you start a company, you can still be an important part of it, and you don't have to be the one who runs it, because I was scared of the politics and getting kicked out and backstabbing and all this stuff. I didn't want to be near that. I just wanted to design neat products where I could never fail. So I forget what the question was, but I was trying to answer it.
So
what Apple failed? Okay, Steve Jobs likely would have started Apple with our investor, Mike Markkula. Apple had 3 equal partners in stock. Myself, Steve Jobs, and Mike Markkula, our investor, the adult who joined us, who ran marketing, who said we would be a marketing-driven company, who said, here's who you hire to establish a technology company, and here's what their roles are and responsibilities. Here's how you be professional. He was the adult, and Steve Jobs started learning from him, and learning marketing techniques, and then dealing with everybody at the high business levels. And I just retired to the laboratory where I could go in and be an inventor still. But so Steve Jobs would have started a company named Apple to work in small computers. Would he have been successful is debatable, because the Apple II computer was so far ahead of the rest of the world. I owned it, I had designed it, and that computer was the first time ever that arcade games would be color, the first time ever that arcade games would be software. This was an incredible gaming machine as well as an incredible computer, and it was all of Apple's profits for the first 10 years of Apple. If you have a great product like that that's well ahead, you know, whether you know it or not, you're going to luck out, and it's going to be very successful. So Steve Jobs, on his own, creating a computer, don't know what he would have done, although he'd obviously very much seen the Apple II, so he might have done something like it, or he might have come to me and said, hey, Steve, can we just have your computer for some stock? I might have said yes. So I don't know, but he might have been, but if he worked on his own, you got to realize he tried to build 3, 4 computers in his life, and they all failed. And they failed, no, they actually failed for real, you know, one of them severe marketing mistakes, and other, you know, sometimes a marketer, Steve Jobs or whoever, tries to take control of a product and overdoes it and makes some bad decisions. One failed because Steve Jobs didn't understand technology and what it cost to make a mouse-based computer. Another was making a computer without any software, the Macintosh, that it didn't even have an operating system, really. It just was a program to look on a screen the way Steve Jobs wanted it to look, but it wasn't really a true computer until we got OS X in later years from Steve's company Next. So I don't know. So it's hard to say if he had all these failures trying to build his own computer from scratch, his ideas, real closed, he controlled everything. Hard to say if it would have succeeded at all, because he failed with all those other products that had millions of dollars in them. But I still like to give him the benefit of the doubt. He just pushes, and he had other people around him would have corralled him, and maybe he would have had the Apple II anyway. I didn't really think, oh, I'm going to keep it because I want to start a company and compete with you. No.
So that leads me to the next question, and this came from a lot of young entrepreneurs who are trying to learn from your mistakes. So let's look back at your career, okay? Right or wrong, what are some of the most important decisions that you made? And please explain that explicitly so that young people can learn from that.
Earlier in my life, I made decisions about basically honesty is the most important thing. If you are working on something, just because it's yours, but if you see something better, you have to acknowledge that the other thing is better. Always go for the right way. One of the most important things was in high school, we had no computers, no books on computers in bookstores, no manuals, didn't know. And I stumbled onto some accidental things, but I discovered a manual for a computer. And I sat down saying, all my knowledge of logic from elementary school science fair projects. There were no chips sold with logic. What is logic? It's a chip you buy that does about as much as a light switch. That's what logic is. I said, can I design on paper? Can I build up a computer? And I taught myself how to design computers. Nothing like anybody else in the world had ever done, because I'd never read any books on it. And eventually I could go down and get manuals. I had a little tricky way to sneak into Slack, where the smartest people in the world don't lock doors, and I could get into their libraries and order manuals for computers from Digital Equipment, from IBM, from Data General, from Hewlett-Packard, from Varian. And every time I got a manual for a computer, I'd close my door on a weekend and sit down and draw the chips that would make that computer. So I had taught myself how to do that, and I came up with, the important thing that I came up with was the Data General Nova computer came out. It was another 4K mini computer. A bunch were coming out in the late 60s. And this computer, when I got done, took half as many chips as all the others. I played a game. I prided myself on how I could redesign and redesign and redesign a computer with saving one chip here. Got it down from 78 to 77. Got it down to 76 chips. Clever ideas in my head of how to save parts. The Data Journal computer, Nova, took half as many parts as all the other computers. I looked at the architecture of the Data Journal Nova, and in the end, I just had to run wires to chips that it had been designed around, rather than designing logic circuits to make decisions and store data and transfer it later times. I didn't have to do all the design. I just ran wires, and it was half as many chips. And that taught me, look at the building, know the building blocks very well. Be a builder, and then you come up with the architecture of what you want to build, but you can modify it and do it differently than other people so that it will take very few of those building blocks. And that was one of my keys to, even at Hewlett-Packard, I had a reputation for being able to come up with smaller ways than the PhDs over in HP Labs. I just prided myself. It's a game that I played. It was a fun thing for me. So always try to think of better ways to do something. Whenever I came up with these little tricks to save parts, I knew that my tricks would never be in any book, because they were all individual. The project that I was working on, the individual project I was working on, I said, what is the best way to do this one? Never knowing how it's been done before is a big advantage. And I just developed ways that I've done things before, but more than that, ways to come up with a new trick that saves parts, and saves money and makes it very unique, makes it original, and gives you enough freedom to add extra parts to do things nobody ever had before.
Perfect. I think, I personally learned a lot of things out of this. So I'm going to actually...
But also, I did finally leave Hewlett-Packard after they turned me down 5 times for that personal computer.
Perfect.
I offered it to them first because I was so ethical that when Steve Jobs said, let's start a company to sell a PC board, we'll build it for $20, sell it for $40. When he said that, I said, I would never start a company and risk losing my job at Hewlett-Packard. So I went and I proposed it to Hewlett-Packard. They turned me down. There was no obvious thing that these personal computers were going to be worth a lot of money. No company would have turned you down. And I did get turned down 5 times, and okay, we had to do our own.
Thank you. So I'm going to actually switch gear a little bit. We have a lot of large corporations here today, and many large corporations are supporting this platform, this Startup World Cup platform. And we received some questions from them. A lot of them are hungry for innovation, and they're trying to use Silicon Valley very effectively. So what do you think? I think you actually were on the both boats, right? You were in big corporation, and you built a small corporation, and then it became a big corporation, right? So you were on both sides of the car. You were in the startups, you were in the large corporation. So what do you think when you see the large corporations? What are some of the biggest impediments to innovation for large corporations?
The biggest impediment for an existing ongoing large corporation is you've got to keep the money wheel turning, your basic sources of revenue. And what you do has to be supportive of your basic source of revenue. And sometimes a disruptive technology comes along, and if you don't spot it, your existing technology after a few years isn't going to be worth much. I mean, ask BlackBerry or Nokia. So how do you encourage that kind of entrepreneur thinking? Well, it's based around disruption. You don't want to be disrupted. If you're a large company, you want to be ahead of the curve on disruption. And one of the things I propose is having as much decision-making at the lowest levels of the management chain as you can, the way Hewlett-Packard did. Hire very good people and let them be able to coordinate their own projects and not have everything has to be totally approved up the bureaucracy chain. A lot of decisions can get made very quickly that way, and that's true of like entrepreneurship within the large company. How do you get a large company that's normally slow? How do you get some fast movements in it? Another thing I propose is a chief disruption officer for a large enough company. And the chief disruption officer does not report to the CEO because the CEO is so concerned about the day-to-day businesses and keeping the company going and the revenues and the profits that they'll only try to blend things into what they're doing and their corporate culture, the way their products are made and what they're known for now. And very outside projects are hard to deal with. A chief disruption officer would have a team that would analyze, what if this new little thing coming from left field, these new startups over here, what if those became the major way that people did it in, maybe it's not visible this year, next year. Maybe it's going to take 3 to 5 years and say, oh my gosh, everyone's going that direction now. They should be focusing on that and trying to get ahead of the curve, maybe supporting some of those companies, owning part of them. Like Hewlett-Packard could have said, hey, wow, you used all our equipment at night, so you designed your Apple computers. Well, we don't want to market it ourselves, but we'd like to own a part of your company, and that would be a very reasonable assertion. Make facilities available, parts, even some resources to insiders who are doing things that aren't in your company's business, just for themselves, maybe for their home, maybe for entertainment, whatever. Make some available, and you know what? Their employment contract can guarantee that you'll own a part of what they do if they hit those big ones that you can't see in advance.
Great. So I will actually follow up with another question. Big corporations, you need to create new positions, CDO, Chief Disruption Officer, right?
Yeah, reporting to the board.
He should not be reporting to the CEO, so he can disrupt anything he wants. So far as
yeah, how can, and his job is, well, his or her job or department is, how do we avoid disruption that might be coming, and how do we create it?
Very good.
And maybe sometimes farm divisions, I'm always for farming divisions out, farming them out to a different city. Everybody wants, I want the whole campus in one place. It's like, I'm a CEO and I want everybody that works for me somewhat near. Hewlett-Packard, when I worked there, I learned a really great thing. They farmed divisions out to better environmental places, nice places to live, and they let those divisions work very independently with visits from the corporate, but not totally in the same place. And I thought that worked a lot better than the way all these Silicon Valley companies do with their campuses.
You know, it reminds me of one of the comments that the Indian Prime Minister Modi made to me. I was asking him when I met him last year that, you know, how the government can help the startup and entrepreneurship platform. And he told me that the only way I can help is I do not want to be on their way. So, I mean, the government doesn't want to be on the way of the entrepreneurship and innovation.
Yeah, and I'd also like to point out another thing. If you have the large company that wants to find innovation, sometimes even the CEO could have a couple of younger, clever builders, people that don't have those advanced college degrees and masters and PhDs and know the subject you want. A lot of younger people and get a good feel for what they're about. I know Steve Jobs did a lot of this. And maybe even hire a couple of people that their whole life, maybe they didn't even go to college, but they just hook things together, they build them, little builders. So useful. People that have gotten to final stages of products on their own, whether it's software or hardware, they get missed. They just get missed because they don't meet the requirements of a job posting. Maybe there should be a job posting called, I don't know, entrepreneurship, entrepreneur in company. Yeah.
So, with that, I'm going to a question that we received from a high school student. I mean, he's a very young person, and he has a very funny question. So, like, look at some of the most successful companies in the world: Apple, Google, Facebook, all of them. How much do you think the right product, or the management team, or the timing, or just plain luck contributed to their success?
More than anything else, I really think it's luck. It is so hard to predict what is going to go and what isn't going to go. It's like predicting a new game, a new song. Is it going to be a big hit? It's so hard. Like, I look at Apple. Okay, I was going to build that computer that was absolutely the foundation of a big company. I was going to build it that year in my life for a lot of reasons that had nothing to do with wanting a big company. just my hobby, my project, what I thought of. I was going to build that computer for myself. It just so happened that that point in time, prices of components, abilities of computers to be applied to useful things that we all did in our lives and make us more masters of our own destiny. It just happened that year was the right year to start things. It was a very rare point in time where a major product, major company could be started with one person instead of teams of dozens of people building the huge big computers of the past. Or once personal computers became so profitable, you had to have big teams because you had to outspend other people.
Perfect. So I'm gonna coming towards the end of our conversation. So I'm gonna actually switch to about young entrepreneurs. Okay. So we created this platform, Startup World Cup, for young people to inspire them. And this is something that me and my partner Vitaly Arvuzov, you are there. Raise your hand. So he is my partner from Europe. So we started this firm, and he agreed that let's split the loss between two of us and start this platform. So you decided to support us from very beginning, right? And thank you so much for coming here and share your passion for the young people. So what do you think about this Startup World Cup initiative? Why you decided to spend all of your valuable time and come here and speak in front of people?
Well, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity. I try to inspire young people, especially in those ages of high school and university ages and slightly beyond, because I go back to my own time frame and so much was going on for me because I let my mind think freely. I loved design, I loved products, I loved making things, and I didn't just hold back and say, oh, you have to do what is planned for you and what other people do. I would also when you're young, you can put a lot of time in. You have the most mental energy, meaning you can think the best, but you also have the most physical energy. You can stay up late at night working on hard problems and get to long, far-off solutions. Keep working at it for weeks. And that physical energy helped me a lot because I would work at Hewlett-Packard on calculators, and I'd come home and I'd work on my own little designs that pop in my head. Not one a week, not every single night of the week, but whenever an idea came to me, I could get to start working on it. Oh my gosh, I'll go back to work tonight and hook something together and pick it up. Well, I had the time. I didn't waste my time going out partying. I was too much of a geek to have a girlfriend or a wife. I had access to resources at work, some chips I could use and some test equipment to test things out. So that was very big to me. And I forget, what was the question?
What do you think about the Startup World Cup?
Well, what do I think about it? Yeah, so I go back to my own time frame. My time, that was so important to me because of the youth gave me those abilities. And startups are the most important thing we got going in the world because I go back to the days in the Homebrew Computer Club also. We were so excited talking about a revolution. We're going to change things for so many people. These little once we have our own computers, we're going to turn the world upside down. The big multi-million-dollar mainframes are going to mean nothing when one person can take in his own computer. This was exciting. We're going to be able to communicate like never before. Type a message, and within an hour, 100 people might read it. That was exciting. And we're going to educate better than ever. Being around a large group of people like this and talking and having similar ideas was the inspiration and the motivation was worth more than what we knew about business or engineering or anything. It was really wanting to do something was the more important factor, and being around other people talking about ideas is what inspired me more than anything, and people I was around. Just going out to dinner and talking about, what if somebody did this? And you do that all over the place. Ideas aren't worth that much because they're happening everywhere. It's the person who actually sits down and says, I'm going to go and try to build something, write some code. I'm going to try to get to a working model. But you have to have a reason to want to do that. You have to want to really badly. Some people think, well, just thinking the idea is enough. No. And it might involve other people. You might, might have business thinking for a great idea. Don't forget the engineers who are used to solving problems and coming up with clever approaches to things. Don't leave them out and say, we'll hire the engineers later.
So in relation to that, I think a lot of inspiration can come from the educational institutions, right? Colleges and universities. So what do you think that colleges and universities can do to inspire innovation and entrepreneurship?
Well, I remember I was my third year of college at Berkeley, and I took only graduate courses in hardware and software design, because by your third year of college, you get to decide what you're going to take. I picked up books on in prior years, I had bought all the books in the university libraries on computer languages and things, so I could learn them even though I didn't take the courses. And in Berkeley, taking the courses, I would start working every single problem in the book on a Thursday, and then by the time class started on Monday, I hardly slept at all. I was halfway through the book. Why would you go halfway through a book when the class is just starting today? Passion. If you love something so much, you work hard at it, and never ever, take away the aspect of really good hard work.
Interesting. So, there are many entrepreneurs in this room. All of them are entrepreneurs out there. They like innovation. That's why they are all here. By the way, guys, people piled up on the left side. Try to move to the right side if possible. It's like getting overcrowded over there. So one of the things that, Steve, that a lot of people wanted to know, and I think the young people, they came here for that, how to become you, how to become Steve Wozniak. Can you give the secret sauce to everyone so that we have more Steve Wozniaks in the future?
Well, you talked about luck once. I look back in my own life, and a lot of accidents somehow took me way, way ahead of other people from a young age. I was always ahead in electronics and computer science, and then thinking out things to design computers in high school better than, with half as many chips as the companies put their products out with. Did I do this because I want to be a great entrepreneur? No. No, I did it because it was just something in my heart, that type of learning on my own. Now, universities, a lot of the university courses, I look at, I got into computer. By the time we started Apple, you have computers, you don't use algebra and calculus and, higher level mathematics like the real, how do those people think that way, doing all their quantum physics and all that? No, you're not one of those geniuses, but I had a lot of good experience, and it didn't necessarily come from school. Yes, a couple of the courses I took at Berkeley gave me great, lucky inspiration of a method that is used, a technique, and then I would sit down and implement the technique in very minimal parts with minimal cost that people wouldn't think of. So I contributed my part always. A lot of it came from not school, from challenging myself, from pushing myself. Education can occur a lot of ways. It can occur from every book you read, every magazine, every product you look at, every designer that you talk to, and hear how they did and some of the problems they solved. So it doesn't necessarily have to come from university, but university represents a lot of the work of your life. Going to school from the earliest days on up to those university days, and getting a degree is so important. That's why, even though I didn't have a degree, I went back to Berkeley under a fake name after Apple was successful. Went back under a fake name for 1 year, and I got my Berkeley diploma in the name I used, Rocky Raccoon Clark.
That was a secret.
But I wanted my kids to hear that I went to a college because it might inspire them to want to make studying and learning a more important part of their life. But if you're motivated to learn, you don't have to learn in school. There's a lot of other ways to learn. Everything in life you learn from. So
you are not recommending dropping out because there is a recipe that if you do not drop out of Harvard, you cannot become the next.
Well, hold on. Hold on. If somebody came to me and they said, "Oh my gosh, I'm with this new startup doing a very different thing than before," or I could go to the university, could take my classes this year, I'd say go with the startup almost always. You can go back to school. I did. You can go back. You can get your education, as you go. But no, to miss out on this is the exciting time. We're doing something. We have a new company. We're a small group of people. We're not a big, huge, well-known Apple, Google, that sort of thing. We're not one of the biggies. We want to have our own. When we started Apple, Steve and I were so young, we thought, oh my gosh, whenever you start a company, it keeps that name forever. You don't get bought out. There's no acquisitions. You just sort of are good and successful, making good products, and forever and ever you grow and go. That's how we thought.
Questions that we received from many startup CEOs who are in the process of putting together a startup or who has a startup. So what are the mistakes they should be careful about? Give 3 don'ts, okay, that they should not do as they are putting together the company and going to become the next Apple maybe.
There are different stages of startups. So I'll go back. Let's say that you have this idea. You're in a dorm room like Mark Zuckerberg, and you have an idea. Here's a neat little idea for an app that doesn't exist yet. And I will write a business plan. I've been trained as a business student. I'll write a business plan. I'll work out some spreadsheets, some estimates of what the revenues will be, and then I'll go pitch it to venture capitalists to raise the money, because it takes money to go into business on a decent scale generally. So, and then after we get our money, we'll take our idea, which is just an idea on paper, and we'll start making it by hiring engineers, maybe in some other part of the world, maybe in India, maybe in Lithuania. So we'll start hiring engineers. No, I say always involve the engineer in thinking out what your product should be, what it could be. Engineers have spent their whole life going through large sequence of things that have to be done in an order and thinking it out and solving problems and being clever and skipping steps. So always include the engineer. Now, if you're going to start a company, I always like to say you should have a businessman who wants a successful business. Because if you're not successful, you die, right? Profit is the most important thing. And if you make profits, you grow, and now you can have, your brain thought up one thing, right? Your brain is going to think of more ideas. Now you can build even better and better projects with the profits that you make. So you want a businessman. Marketing, you'd better understand whether your product is worth money and how much it's worth, you know, if you're going to have a business. And that's marketing. That's so important. I found that the best marketing I encountered in my life is not thinking out, here's a product other people would like. Here's something they would buy. Here's how much it's worth for them. Here's what it will do. Here are the options and the trade-offs we can make. And those, you don't make those in a day or a second like I'm talking, I mean, over weeks and months. But you can think that way, but if you're building something that you want to use yourself, a car that will meet your needs, you'll wind up with a Tesla, you know, and you'll do something very different than anyone else would have maybe, because it's for you. You're not building it for the rest of the world. Every electric car was made small to save money on batteries and save weight until the Tesla. Well, Elon Musk had a family with 5 kids and, you know, had to have a large car. It's the only thing that made sense for him. And we got the Tesla out of it, which is helping push that change to the future of, you know, electric vehicles and self-driving and everything. So include that, and don't forget the engineer. So 3 parts: businessman, marketing, engineering, all equally important. And don't say, oh, we can just get by with part of the story. When you're young, try to know people that are these good little builders, like I said. If you're going to start a company from scratch, finding something who can actually build hardware or software, get it done, and do a good job. A lot of the simplicity and elegance goes into their work. Find that person that's more important than just bumping into somebody by accident who has gone to classes in engineering, say.
Thank you so much, Steve. So that was the last question for Steve, but I need to tell you that he's such a beautiful mind. I was in the back, green room. I was talking to him, and a person like him, he's so busy. And when I was talking about that today we have the Startup World Cup finale event between 4 and 6 tonight in the afternoon, he said that I'm going to stick around and I'm going to see these young kids presenting. So he is an entrepreneur in the heart, and he is a beautiful mind. So a round of applause for Steve Wozniak, everyone. Thank you so much.
I will be here tonight, too, to meet and greet people after we're all done, if you'd like to meet me. Person to person, I like that. Hopefully tonight I'll get to present the big one. This one's